Today in class you learned about linear parent functions. We're going to look at tonight's video. It's slope from a graph and ordered pairs. So we're going to learn about how to find a slope of a line given a graph or a slope of a line given ordered pairs. You're looking at your foldable with slope, and we're going to only do 2 sections for tonight. First off, we need to know what slope is. Slope is a rate of change. You can find slope from graphs, tables, ordered pairs, or equations, and we're going to learn all 4 of those over the next couple of days. So slope is a rate of change. When I hear the word slope, the first thing that comes to mind is skiing. I have never been skiing and I have always wanted to go. When you go skiing on a mountain. So we're going to look at Slope Mountain to help us remind us about slopes. If you'll draw this out to the side of your foldable, there's not room underneath it, but out to the side we're going to look at Slope Mountain. Now, you read graphs from left to right, just like you read a book from left to right. So the first thing we're going to do is when we start on our mountain, going up the slope, this is a positive slope. So we're going to draw Slope Mountain, and then we're going to label this as a positive slope. Once you get to the top of the mountain and you get to ski down the mountain as you're going down from left to right, that's a negative slope. At the bottom of Slope Mountain, there's a nice flat piece, and when you get to the bottom of Slope Mountain, your skis get stuck in the snow and you start rolling along, and as you're rolling, this is a zero slope. A zero slope is a horizontal line. And then you'll notice you come to a cliff and fall off. When you fall off the cliff, it's a vertical line. Vertical lines have an undefined slope. If you'll take a minute to draw Slope Mountain and label, remember we read this from left to right just like we read a book from left to right. Going up from left to right is positive. As you go down from left to right, that's negative. When you have a horizontal line, that is a zero slope, and when you have a vertical line, that's a undefined slope. Another way to remember slope is with Mr. Slope. This is just another method for remembering our positive, negative, zero, and undefined slope. On Mr. Slope, we're going to draw the head, and this is going to help us remember our positive, negative, zero, and undefined. Mr. Slope has 2 eyebrows that look like this. As we go up from left to right, that's a positive slope, and as we go down from left to right, that's a negative slope. So we have a positive and negative slope for his eyebrows. Then he's got a nose that is straight up and down. When we have a vertical line, the slope is undefined, so we make a U to finish off his nose for undefined. His mouth is a nice horizontal line. When we have a horizontal line, our slope is 0, and we can see all 4 types of slope in Mr. Slope Guy. We have positive and negative for his eyebrows. His nose is an undefined slope, and his mouth makes a 0 slope. Alright, now if you'll turn over the tab that says graph, we're going to find slope from a graph. Our slope from a graph, we use the letter M to represent slope, and I like to think about the M as our movement. So slope is the movement on a graph, and we use rise over run, or it's the change in our y values over the change in our x values. So M stands for slope. Slope is rise over run. We use right triangles to graph or to find our slope with our rise and our run. Now, if you will find the 2 ordered pairs on the graph, we're going to have an ordered pair at 0, 2. Put a dot at 0, 2. And then there's another ordered pair at 2, 5. So we've got an ordered pair here. We're going to count our rise and our run. It does not matter which point we start at. I'm going to start at 0, 2. As we rise, we're moving up the graph. When we rise, we go up 3 spaces, and we're making a right triangle to help us graph this. So we rise 3 spaces, and then we run to get to our next point. We're running to the right 2 spaces. So we went up 3 and to the right 2. Our slope is equal to 3 over 2. This cannot reduce, and we want to leave it as a fraction, so we leave our slope as 3/2. We're going to work a lot in class tomorrow on finding slope from a graph. It's rise over run. And something I want you to remember that if you go up on a graph, it's a positive number. If we move down on the graph, that's a negative number. If you move to the right on a graph, that's a positive, or if you move to the left on a graph, that's a negative. So the signs are important. We need to know if we're positive or negative. If we go up, it's positive, down is negative, to the right is positive, and to the left is negative. And remember to check your slope. Remember that if we're going up from left to right on a graph, that's a positive slope. And if we're going down from left to right on a graph, we should have a negative slope. So up from left to right, positive slope, down from left to right, it's a negative slope. If you'll turn to the third tab, we have ordered pairs. From ordered pairs, we can also find the slope of a line. Looking at these ordered pairs, we're going to find the change in y over the change in x. Remember, we use the letter m to represent slope. Now, this sign right here is called a delta. This means change in. So this is the change in y's divided by the change in x. It's the ratio of our y's changing and our x's. Think about on our graph, we did our rise, that was our y values, and then we did our run, that is our x values. Now on this, we're going to write y2 minus y1. So we want to know the difference between our y values, if you'll fill that in for me. y2 minus y1. We're going to divide that by x2 minus x1. So it's the difference in our y values and the difference in our x values. We use the 2 and the 1 to denote the difference between which y value we're talking about, and those are subscripts, so they're at the bottom, and that means which one of the y's we're talking about and which one of the x's we're talking about. Remember, the y goes first. It has to be on top. It's our rise over our run, or our change in y values over our change in x values. This is the opposite of when you graph ordered pairs, where you do your x's first. So we're doing our y's first. That represents our slope, how much we rise and how much we run. So for our example, we're going to find the slope of a line that passes through the points 2, -3, and 5, -6. We could do this on a graph. We could plot our points. We could go over 2 and down 3 and put a dot. We could go to the right 5 and down 6 and put a dot. And then we could count our rise and our run. Or we can use our slope formula to help us find this. So using our slope formula, we're going to label each of these for their values. Remember, in an ordered pair, the x values come first. So we're going to have x1 and y1 for our first ordered pair. There has to be an x and a y from each ordered pair, so we're going to label x1 and y1. They came from our first ordered pair. We have the x labeled and the y labeled. Our second ordered pair, we're going to have x2 and y2. So we have an x and a y from the second ordered pair, and we use the subscript 2 to make the difference between them. Now, our formula is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So we're going to plug in the values for each of these. Our y2, our value for our second y, is -6, and our value for our first y is -3. So we have -6 minus a -3. We're going to have to be very careful in just a minute about this minus and negative. The x values are going to go on the bottom. So we have x2 minus x1 on the bottom. The value for x2 is 5, and the value for x1 is 2. So we're going to have 5 minus 2 on the bottom. Now, our slope, we have -6 minus -3 on top and 5 minus 2 on the bottom. All we did was we plugged in our values for y2, y1, x2, and x1. Now we're going to solve them. On the top, when we have minus a negative, remember minus a negative means we're adding. We're doing the opposite of negative. So -6 plus 3 gives us a -3 on top. In the denominator, 5 minus 2 is +3. So now we have -3 divided by 3. We're going to simplify this. Negative 3 divided by 3 is a negative 1. So the slope of this line would be a negative 1 for our slope. We use this equation to help us instead of having to graph them and count the rise and the run. We're going to work on this in class tomorrow as well. Make sure if you have any questions you write them down and that you are prepared for finding slope from a graph and from ordered pairs.